Hey everyone, welcome to Birds of a Feather. Today we're going to be making over this little sewing box. It's seen better days. It's missing a handle. It's also missing a handle right here on the side. We're going to have to take a chisel to that to get the rest of the wood off. Also missing the handle on the front that allows you to carry it. It's got great storage. It just opens right out on either side. So it'll be very useful for all my sewing notions. So what I'm going to do is give it a good clean. I'm going to take everything apart, take all the hardware off, and then I'm going to give it a good sand, and then we're going to get going on some chalk paint. As you're taking these things off, make sure that you're putting it into a baggie to keep everything together. And I can take this all outside to give it a good sand. These metal pieces that were on the outside of the cantilever box are pretty rusty, so we're going to be putting them into the ultrasonic cleaner to see how they come up. And then I'm just going to go ahead and repaint them. If you don't have an ultrasonic cleaner like we do, you can simply use some of this simple green to give them a rinse and scrub.
Wow, look at how much dirt came off of them.
That's a lot of filth.
Wow, that's really dirty. So what we're going to do, so we don't lose the screws in the sink, we're going to need to rinse them off with water. We're going to use this strainer. Keep the bag open.
Probably the hardest part of the whole procedure is getting the Ziploc open.
Especially if it gets soapy. Okay.
Now, just in case you accidentally missed the colander there, we also have a stopper in the sink.
You can see how dirty it is. That's the dirt. We're going to rinse them with lots of hot water over the strainer. The screws are pretty small. We'll put them on paper towels to dry. So you can see it's taken all the paint off. That's what a lot of the color was. These ultrasonic remove paint. And you can see there's actually rust under there, so it's a good thing we clean them properly. But look at the screws. Look at how clean they are. Beautiful. Here's the difference. In the cleaner, without the ultrasonic, the paint stayed on, but they're nice and clean. But you can see the difference. The ultrasonic ripped all the paint off. So these ones wouldn't fit in there, so we're just doing them by hand. But then what we're going to do to get rid of the rust, we're going to use the Vapor Rust. Non-toxic, really, really safe to use product, but it'll take all of this rust off. We're going to put them back into here with some Vapor Rust and let them sit for a few hours, and all of this rust will come away.
Now that the sewing box is all sanded, I'll be using Dixie Belle products on it. So because this wood is a mahogany, I'll be using Boss, and that just serves to block odors and stains and especially bleed through. Mahogany tends to bleed through red, so you definitely want to put some on if you're using lighter colors. And I am using light colors on this particular project. I'll be using the Chalk Mineral Fluff and also Haint Blue. And I'm not quite sure yet, but perhaps I'll be using some of this Gemstone Mousse on the metal hardware. And of course I'll be painting it with my mini angle brush, which I love for most projects. In order to paint these pieces efficiently, I've got it set up here on a Lazy Susan. I just have a piece of brown paper taped down to the surface, so just in case there's any paint spills. And we've got it on these paint pyramids here, just to lift it so that when I do brush on, I can go right to the edge. So give your Boss a shake. I'm just going to do that behind the camera here. Just offloading whatever's on my brush just to get this edge, and then I'll just do one long stroke. These paint pyramids are great because you can get right to the bottom. I tend to want to overwork it, so I'm just going to leave it at that. You really shouldn't be brushing it too much. Now once I finish this coat, I'm going to wait an hour, and then I'm going to come back and do a second coat. Okay, just if you get drips, you can just brush right along. The Lazy Susan that I'm using right here is actually a vintage piece. At one point, I was going to make one and show you guys. I think I'll still do that. Just going to smooth out any drips. And this one can be set aside, and I'm going to move on to the next. So like I said, this is going to dry for an hour. We're going to come back and do a second coat, and then we're going to be ready for paint. In order to paint the rest of these little pieces, I'm going to use a trick that my husband taught me. I'm just taking some masking tape here, and I'm just putting it down sticky side up. Then I'm going to take 2 more pieces of tape. Let's just center this. And I'm putting these pieces on sticky side down. And that's to hold this piece that I just placed in the center. Okay, now this is sticky. And what I'm going to do is place my pieces right on. And there you go, they stick. Tell the right side because they still have a faint little bit of old paint on them. So now that that is stuck down, let's just fold this back, get this stickiness out of the way. Now I'm going to bring back my fluff. This is the paintbrush I'm going to be using, and it's still damp from when I washed it out, and that's perfectly fine. You want a little bit of dampness on your brush. So now I'm going to go ahead and paint, and as you can see, nothing's going to move on me. And I can even get the edges. So I can just lift this up and just come right along and get those edges. Just make sure I've got the top here. Okay, then I'm going to come back and just smooth that out. And this is going to get 2 coats, so if you have a little bit of area showing through that's still metal, not a big deal. You'll get it on the second coat. And this stick is wonderful because you can actually move it around and you can see what you're painting. Get all the areas that you don't want to miss. Now the other way to do this, of course, is to set up the same paint stick as I showed you and take out your paint sprayer and just spray these all. It's really too cold right now to do that, to do it outside, so I'm going to do this indoors. And it's going to look just as good. Of course, spray painting with an HVLP sprayer is much faster. But sometimes, you know, by the time you set it all up and clean it again, you might as well just do this by hand. Here they are, all complete and drying. If I haven't already said it today, the best tools are your hands. So I'm just dipping right into the mousse on the lid with a finger, and we're going to start by going right around the edge. Since it's water-based, it just washes right off. So just make sure you've got all around the edge before you start in the center section. And for that, I'm going to use this dowel just to hold it down. Actually, let's try it this way. So then I'm dipping into the mousse, and I'm going one way, and I'm going to turn it right the way around, put the dowel back in, dip in again, and finish off. And just smooth it out. And there, it's as easy as that. So now you can just rinse your hands off and you'll be clean as a whistle. I've got this beautiful cotton bud sprig here, and we're going to embellish the left side with that. The right side is going to be a JP Coats, well, I'm going to hand paint this. So what I did was I printed out on a piece of acetate. You probably can't pick this up on camera, but it's more or less a bullseye. I'm going to hand paint the colors in, and then I'm going to also hand paint in the wording. So what I did was I put the wet side down, and I took just this embossing tool, and I just outlined all the way around, leaving the outline where I'm going to paint. What I'll be using is this Midnight Sky from Dixie Belle chalk paint, and I don't have it here right now, but I'm also going to be using the Gemstone Mousse in this middle section, right in here. So it'll be the Midnight Sky, the gold mousse, and again the Midnight Sky in the middle. Let's set this part aside for now. We'll paint that in later. And I'll just move this over here. And make sure that you have the door the way it's going back on. These are where my hinges are. So I know I've got it this way. So keeping in mind that I have to leave room for the handle. Position it around there. So when you know where you want to position it, just bend it back, and then I'll take a piece of tape. I'll just tape it where I want it. And I'll just peel the rest off and then lay it down. And I can just smooth it out. I'm going to take this tool that comes in the package. I'm just going to start rubbing. Now, I have not sealed this. What I did do though was I painted Boss because I wasn't sure what I was going to do on here. Let's just see what's going on underneath. So starting at one end, I'm just lifting the corner. And I can see from my angle that it's releasing. So as I burnish this, I can lift. Just come across here. Okay, I can see that's not quite burnished. And as you can see, it's sticking really well. This is my very first time using a transfer. I have never used a transfer before. I'm just turning this as I go on my Lazy Susan here. And I just want to work in from the edges into the center. So far I'm really impressed. I'm just loving this. It's very easy and it's just instant impact. Okay, and there we go. I'm just going to make sure there's no air bubbles in here. If you've ever worked with transfers before, you may know that sometimes you get sort of this ghosting at the edge where it's just stuck down. And to remedy that, I've got this pad here. I've cut just a corner of it out. And what I'm going to do is just make sure it's well adhered. I'm going to come in from the center, and I'm just going to move outwards. And by doing this, I'm just making sure that it's really well adhered and blending in at the edges. And I don't know if the camera's picking this up, but it literally just disappears. So I'm just gonna go all around the edges wherever I see that ghosting. You know, guys, my husband didn't even know I was doing a transfer, and I took it over to him and he thought it was hand painted. That's how beautiful this transfer is. He must have thought I had a hidden talent because he's never seen me paint, so I don't know why he thought that I did it by hand, but I wasn't blessed with that talent. I know that a lot of people are, and it's just a wonderful talent to have. And if painting isn't one of your talents either, then transfers are the way to go. Look how gorgeous that is. I can't wait to top coat it and get this done. I also want to point out that I have some gemstone mousse here along the edge. This is the golden gemstone, and it's just a beautiful match for the sort of golden tones in the leaves here. I just think this cotton bud transfer is perfect. It's really in keeping with our theme of thread cabinet, sort of that antique-y look. Got the middle painted. I'm just going to let that dry, and while that's drying I can probably go around the edge with just a finer brush. I used a wider brush for the middle to get all this area, and I'll find this one here. I'll use this one just to get in around the edges. In the meantime, I'm going to rinse out my other brush, and I'll be using it for the gold gemstone mousse when I do the center part. To do around the edge, I'm just sort of offloading paint in the middle and then just coming to the edge and running right along with the tips of the bristles. As soon as I finish the outer edge, I'm going to turn it around and I'm going to do the very same thing on the inner edge. So I'm just dipping in ever so slightly. If you get too much on the brush, you can wipe it off. And just let the edge of the brush guide you. I'll finish the rest off camera and I'll show you how that's doing in just a moment. So now I'm working on the inner edge, and again I'm offloading in the center and I'm just bringing the bristles to touch the outline. I've got everything brushed on now. I just finished the gold, and I'll probably just go around the inside again just to touch this up. But before I do that, I'm just going to finish off the edges with the gemstone mousse. I'm just literally going to get some on the finger here. And I'm just going to use my finger to apply it along the edge. As you can see, a little goes a long way. So I'm just going to continue going around the edge in that fashion. On goes the design for the JP Coats label, and I'm going to transfer it and then hand paint it. To paint the lettering above the 50, I've got a clip-on light here, and it'll allow me to see where I'm painting. I'm using a very fine brush to get into all this lettering here. I'm just picking up the tiniest amount on the tip of the paintbrush, and then I'm coming over to the work and I'm just outlining first. And as the brush gets dry, I'll dip in again and then continue where I left off. So I'm continuously turning the work so that the edge is at the best angle. And then I'm going to turn the work again, and then I'm going to come at it from the left side here. After both sides are outlined, then I'll come back and fill in. I'm just continuously turning. And I'm going at the edge. And then I'll come back and fill in. So there it is. I'm going to finish the rest of this off camera, and then we're going to continue on to the next step. So here I've got 2 sections done, and I'm just about to start the 3rd section here. And I just want to point out that I tried using shelf liner as my mask and also acetate, but because that didn't stick, it was a little difficult to do. So now I've changed strategies, and I've just used some tape, some painter's tape, and just a piece of plastic. Actually, this is left over from the transfer you saw me do earlier. So I'm using that as a makeshift mask. So let's paint. I've got a dampen brush here, and once again I'm using Fluff. I'm just going to dip in. I don't want a lot of paint on the brush. Got about that much on there. And I'm going to offload it in the middle and brush in from the edges. Let's just remove this tape here. And I'm going to brush in from the edges after I've offloaded most of the paint. I don't want it bleeding underneath, so I'm just doing this very carefully. And let's just move right along. Make sure I've got enough paint here. Once again, I'll lift that tab there. Just going to hold it on the edge. And I'm just brushing in from the edges. Let's just make sure I've got enough there. I'm just using what I have. I want it to be dry so it doesn't seep under. Then I'm going to take some longer strokes and just smooth everything out. So I'm going to go wash out the brush. Just soap and water gets that clean. And now we can peel this back. And there you go, we've got our mask. So I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to let it go about a couple of hours. It really only needs half an hour, but since I'm going to be transferring onto this, I want to make sure it's really good and dry. Here's the rest of the wording for the front. It's printed on acetate, and as you can see, it's mirrored so that when I turn it right side up, and put it onto the actual piece, it's going to be red right side up. Here's the acetate that's going on to the next section, and as you can see, this one is split. So I've had to span across the gap, and what I did was clamp it on the inside. As you can see there. I'm going to tape this down, and then I'm going to take my stylus and transfer the lettering onto the white chalk paint. And what I'm doing is going over it with this embosser stylus. I'm just going to outline all the way around. And this has a little ball on the end. I don't know if the camera picks this up. Okay, so that was my last one. So let's see how that's looking. And there you go. It's transferred right onto the chalk paint. I just applied some clear adhesive, and now I'm going to take some of this foil, I'm going to lay it over, and I'm going to give that a good rub. The other thing that you can do is take a paper stump and just gently press that in. And there you go, it's all done. I decided that I want to put a little bit of a surprise on the inner portions of the lids. As you open it up, you're going to see this beautiful Morrocan stencil, and I'm going to be stenciling it in a color called Haint Blue. It's got just a touch of like a blue-gray, which is going to be really pretty with the wallpaper that I'm lining the inner boxes with. So I'm just going to shake this up. Now I've got some paper towels here because I want my brush to be really dry as I stencil. Let's just open this. Very pretty color. I'm just going to dip in tips of the bristles, just like that. I'm going to give it a swirl. And then I'm just going to come to the stencil and pounce. Now I don't have any adhesive on here. I'm just going to hold it down as I go. And as it gets dry, I'll just dip in again, give a swirl, and come back to the work and pick up where I left off. Now if you're finding that it's a little bit too light once you lift this, you can always do a second layer. But I think I'm just gonna like the consistency of what I have here. Now as you saw, I just literally went back to the paper towel and dip back in because the paint there is still wet. It's just an up and down pouncing motion that I'm doing here. I'm not swirling. So I want to ensure that the paint doesn't seep underneath and get that bleed through. Now I forgot to mention that I do have this taped along the four edges here just to hold it in place so it doesn't shift on me. And as it dries out, just dip back in. And literally, you're just getting the slightest amount on your brush here and just offloading it onto the paper towel. I'll just continue where I left off here. Okay, then I'm coming back on the right side here and I'm coming across. And as you do this, you're holding it down with your left hand and pouncing with your right. And if you see areas that are just a little too light, you can come back in. It's just going to give you some texture. And again, coming back and swirling, offloading onto the paper towel. Make sure it's fairly dry and pounce away. This is a great way to get that stress out. Just take it out on the wood. I'm going back to the paper towel because I know I've got wet paint there. Don't let anything go to waste. If you've got wet paint on the paper towel, then use it. No need to dip in and get fresh paint if you've got perfectly good paint there. So I'm going to continue the rest of this off camera, and then I'm going to come back to show you the reveal. Painting's all done. I've washed my stencil brush just with some soap and water, and it's reveal time. So let's lift this tape. I'll leave one hinge over here just in case I don't like what I see. I can always place it back down. And there we go. Wow, that's pretty. No need to keep this because I'm liking what I see. So, as you can see, a dry brush and just a quick stippling motion gives you a beautiful result with no bleed. That'll just look stunning once it's top coated with some satin clear. And there you go. Beautiful Morocco stencil on the inside of the lid. A really nice surprise when you open it up. If you're interested in trying out some of these products, I'll leave links down in the description. I hope you enjoyed this thread cabinet inspired painted sewing box. To finish it off, I line the inside with upcycled wallpaper and add bobbins as the lid pulls. For more paint ideas, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and ring that bell to get notifications of upcoming projects.